Why do communists bring in so many foreigners? What's the angle? Is it that all these foreigners have read the works of Karl Marx and now they just want to implement? No, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. The communist is a revolutionary. He is trying to have a revolution wherever he happens to be. That revolution is going to involve killing people, destroying things, burning down the country where his revolution is taking place. Therefore, the biggest threat to him, the biggest enemy to the communist, are patriotic citizens of whatever country he's having a revolution in. Because people who love their country don't want it destroyed and don't want it burnt down. So, if you want to burn it down, you got to go find some people who will allow you to do it and, in fact, help you to do it if you bring them into the country. That Afghani scumbag who killed that wonderful young lady, the National Guard soldier, Sarah Beckstrom, he was, of course, brought in from Afghanistan. Now, why was he here? What happened? You remember, talked about it a little bit in the opening of the show. Afghanistan fell because the Biden administration, they screwed everything up. Then they looked bad on camera. Well, they looked bad on camera because civilians were falling from C-130s and the whole country was in chaos. But then they found what was, for them, the perfect solution, you see. What's the solution? Well, if people are pointing out how many innocent civilians are dying over there, then what you need to do is save them, you see. How do you save them? Throw them on a plane and bring them to America. That's how you save them. Then you've, in the mind of a communist, killed two birds with one stone. You get great PR from saving these refugees, and you get a loyal, hostile foreigner who will vote Democrat and murder as many Republicans as they possibly can, and so will their 85 kids they've brought. And the Biden administration, of course, lied through their teeth and talked about all the vetting.
What reassurances can you make about the screening process and the attempts to make sure that somebody like that doesn't make his or her way here?
I can absolutely assure you that no one is coming into the United States of America who has not been through a thorough screening and background check process.
We're conducting thorough security screening in the intermediate stops they're making for anyone who is not a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident of the United States. Anyone arriving in the United States will have undergone a background check. And we must all work together to resettle thousands of Afghans who ultimately qualify for refugee status.
Well, that's a lie. You ever been through a background check? Or known someone who has been through a background check? You know how long it takes? Why does it take so long? Well, you have to go and you have to interview people who know that person. You have to dig through documentation, criminal history. We were loading Afghanis onto C-130s as fast as humanly possible. It took about 5 minutes. They didn't background check anybody. They didn't vet anybody. Alejandro Mayorkas essentially had to say as much a little while later.
The standard procedure is an in-person interview for refugees or visa applicants. Now, you've testified that you're not doing those interviews.
Not at all.
That they're not happening.
You are correct that we are not conducting in-person full refugee interviews of 100% of the individuals.
What percentage are you conducting?
I don't have that information.
What number have been interviewed?
What we are doing.
Wait. What number of the more than 60,000 brought to the country? What number have received an in-person interview before they came to the country? Because you said 100% are screened. So what percentage have been given an actual interview by a trained official before they come to the country?
When you're speaking of a full refugee-like interview, I don't have that data.
They didn't interview them. They didn't care. This is about PR and bringing foreigners in. If some people die afterwards, doesn't matter to the communist. He's fighting a revolution. People die. And you had dutiful little communists, foot soldiers like Jake Tapper, calling you a bigot if you didn't want all these people here.
There are a number of other voices in the Republican Party that are already, whether on television or on tweets or whatever, starting to demonize Afghan immigrants, starting to talk about this is Biden's plan to put more Muslims in the country, starting to insinuate that these are bad people, they're terrorists, et cetera, really rank bigotry. What's your reaction when you see it? Because it is, I wouldn't say it's the prevalent voice in the Republican Party, but it's getting louder.
That's what the communist does. Bring as many barbarians into your country to rape and murder and pillage, and of course bleed you dry of your taxpayer money. And the second you throw a fit about it, he'll call you a racist. Don't allow these communist tactics to work. Cut off all immigration, legal and illegal, and start deporting tens of millions of people if you want to save America.
Do you know what the motive was at this point? Do you believe the suspect acted alone?
You know, we're still going through all of that information, and I'll let the FBI and DOJ reveal new information. But I will say we believe he was radicalized since he's been here in this country. We do believe it was through connections in his home community and state, and we're going to continue to talk to those who interacted with him, who were his family members, to talk to them. So far, we've had some participation, but anyone who has information on this needs to know that we will be coming after you, and we will bring you to justice. We absolutely will persecute you because we do know that we will never allow this to continue to happen in our country. Allow individuals who came to our country that were unvetted by Joe Biden, allowed to run free and loose. We are going to bring them to justice and make sure that they're returned out of this country if they aren't here for the purposes of being an American.
Who was this freaking guy who killed one of our soldiers? Has another fighting for his life. Let's talk to Julio about it. Joining me now, United States Marine. You can check out his Substack at mostlypeaceful.media. Julio Rosas. Julio, you, as always, have done some digging on this scumbag. Who was he? Why was he here? Why did he do what he did?
So apparently he was brought over during the fall of Afghanistan back in 2021. And so, I mean, at the time, there were concerns, obviously, that because the Biden administration was really focused on just getting people onto planes to juice up the numbers, that the people that, quote unquote, deserve to be on the planes weren't necessarily the ones getting on it. Now, in this case, it appears that this guy was part of a CIA unit from during that time, and there's some reporting by Jerry Dunleavy where the unit that he was a part of, the CIA cut a deal that said if you help secure the airport in Kabul, you will be evacuated along with your families, and so that appears to be kind of the deal that was set up. And so I know that people are there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered, right? Because it's not just the fact of how he got here. So it's like, okay, so he's been in the country for about 4 years, going on 5 years. What has he been doing? Did he have any of this animosity prior to being flown from Afghanistan? And I was the first one to report that this terrorist screamed, Allahu Akbar while he was carrying out this attack, and so there's very much a lot of this is just the continuing effects of the Biden administration's disastrous policies. And I will say that people have said, well, his asylum claim was approved this year under the Trump administration, and so clearly the Trump administration is at fault. And what I would say to that is like, well, actually, it shows that clearly, even though this guy was supposedly vetted, to the point where you're working not just with just the regular military, but with the CIA, and they're still willing to carry out this attack, even though they were brought over to the United States, that shows that this was a bad idea to begin with. And I think a lot of people knew that at the time, but they still said, well, we can't have the bad optics. We already have bad optics at the border because that was happening during that time. So we got to compromise national security in order to avoid that. So this is it's to be expected, unfortunately, that something like this was bound to happen, whether it's someone from the southern border or someone that was brought over in that chaotic evacuation period.
Julio, clarification on something, and I understand so many details are fuzzy, we may not know, but worked with the CIA. A second people hear that, they think this guy was dressed in all black, low crawling through an air conditioning vent to pick locks and things like that. You know, people immediately go to that, but doesn't sound like his involvement was that in depth. It was, hey, help secure an airport. Was he more involved than that?
From what I've seen, yes. Because it was beyond translation, right? I mean that was kind of the standard, priority for people. Is like oh yeah, we got to get the translators, we got to get all these people out. But yeah, from what I've seen, it looks like he was more involved with carrying out significant missions, with CIA units, on behalf of the CIA. And again, I just go back to, okay, so, but then you go back and you ask anybody, not even just Afghanistan, but since we're talking about Afghanistan, you ask any GWAT vet that deployed to Afghanistan, and they will have dozens of stories about how problematic the Afghan allies were, how they were not trustworthy. And I know that right now the people that have been advocating for Afghans to be relocated to the United States, they say, well, we can't blame this one guy and put it to the whole population. But insider attacks were common throughout the entire time period that we were there in that country. Unfortunately, there were many cases of green on blue attacks, and now you're seeing a lot of veterans on social media talking about how. So one case, like before we went out on missions, we had to confiscate the Afghans' phones for 48 hours, and we couldn't tell them where we were going because we didn't want them to leak that information to the Taliban or Al Qaeda. So this was problematic from the start, right? And so it is completely crazy then to say, well, we're going to airlift 100,000 people out of this country with all these problems and resettle them in the United States, and just assume nothing bad is going to happen as a result of that. And really, that's one of the reasons why President Trump was elected, because we're done with that idiotic policy. America first means that we put the priority and the well-being of American citizens first. And when something like this happens, it just highlights how we can't continue policies like that.
Julio, State Department is pausing visas for Afghan passport holders. That sounds great. I'm all on board with that. But how many of these people are already here, and what's the plan for that? Are we rounding them up and shipping them home? But how does this work?
Well, for the first part, the answer is too many, in my opinion.
No.
But also, but this is a problem, right? Because the administration, unfortunately, is having to play catch up on everything, and especially when it comes to immigration. I mean, that's just a web that can go all different places, and it's not as simple as, because then some people have kids at this point, so now they're technically American citizens, and it's not just with Afghans, right? I mean, this is just, like I said, it's the whole totality of this problem. So I think obviously there's going to be a renewed focus on that. And I mean, because this guy drove from Washington State. I mean, this guy went out of his way and the most inconvenient way possible to do this, right? So this was premeditated. This was clearly thought out to do this. And we're seeing all these other cases where, again, Afghan nationals who were brought over or who came over the southern border, they're being arrested for plotting attacks on American soil. So I think the administration is going to have to really focus on that, and I know that they are. But then you take in all the other nationalities from all the other problematic countries that have problems with terrorism, because Afghanistan is not the only one where you had people coming up through the southern border from. So it's just it's a cluster. It's a cluster, and that's why it was important that DHS and ICE and Border Patrol got their increase in funding through the One Big Beautiful Bill. But that obviously takes time to implement. And so, I don't fully expect this, unfortunately, to get resolved even within Trump's remaining term, because of all the problems that I've said. This is going to be a decades long problem, and we don't really have that time. So I believe it's going to be worked on. It is being worked on, but it definitely requires move with a purpose.
No doubt. Julio, thanks, my brother, as always. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.